What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Triple Play Fantasy YouTube channel. We got a fun video today as we're going back to our fantasy review series. Today, we're talking about the Chicago Bears and ultimately what we can expect from them looking ahead into 2022, as this is our Triple Play Fantasy Review Chicago Bears edition. Let's start off first with looking at the 2021 record for the Chicago Bears. They were 6-11, third place in the NFC North. They got a lot of nice building blocks over in Chicago that I'm excited to dive into. So without further ado, let's look at our fantasy football relevant players from the 2021 season. Now, remember, when I do my videos, I like to look at weeks 1 through 17, and that's where I value their fantasy at, because week 18, a lot of people didn't play, and that can kind of affect their finishes and where they should be placed looking to next season. So Justin Fields, QB 31, David Montgomery, RB 20, Darnell Mooney, wide receiver 27, Allen Robinson, wide receiver 83, and Kmet, tight end 21. Let's start off, of course, with the man, the myth, the legend, that is Justin Fields, who scored at least 16.9 fantasy points in all of his last 4 games he started and completed them. So you guys remember he was hurt for part of those games, so he didn't necessarily start and complete every single one he played in. But the last 4 he started and finished in, he averaged at least 16.9 fantasy points. In those games, in those 4 games, he averaged 8.5 attempts for 64.2 rushing yards on the ground and 5 passing touchdowns over those 4 games. So over 60 rushing yards and nearly 9 attempts per game. That's a really nice floor for your starting quarterback. And you can expect next year to have a better weapons in place for him. You expect to have not just Darnell Mooney, but you'd expect to potentially them draft a receiver. Cole Kmet's going into his second year. Jimmy Graham right now is still with the team. So there is definitely some upside looking ahead to the scheme and the weapons he's going to have in 2022, which means the ceiling is sky high for Justin Fields. His fantasy value is definitely up. This is a guy that could potentially be a QB1 next year if everything falls into place like it should. David Montgomery, who had 18 or more carries in 5 of his last 6 games and 30 receptions over that time. So he was being utilized in the receiving game, which is what many people were hoping he would be. He is just the guy that became the do-it-all back for the Chicago Bears. He scored 21 or more PPR points in 2 of the 3 games to finish the season. And again, leaving a good taste in fantasy owners' mouths as he, again, was the workhorse for the Bears. Not only in the passing game, but he's also was getting a ton of the goal line work. He is their goal line back as it stands right now. So somebody that is on the field for all 3 downs, you got to love. And you'd expect there to be more running lanes next year with the consistent passing attack that you would expect Justin Fields to eventually become that type of threat where they're going to have to not stack the box against David Montgomery. Also with the RPO threat, that's going to open up more running lanes for David Montgomery. His fantasy value for me is definitely up. He's somebody that, again, I think could also be a solid RB2 again next season, and somebody that could be even better than he was in 2021. Darnell Mooney, our next guy on the list. From week 8 on, he averaged just over 15 fantasy points per game. He was the wide receiver 12 over the second half of the season. And the reason I put over the second half of the season wide receiver 12, we could have shortened that over a 4-week span, 3-week span when he was really hot and he was the wide receiver 2. But the thing is, with that large of a sample size, the fact that over the second half of the season, since week 8, he was the wide receiver 12, which means he's a wide receiver 1. Over that long of a period, that's incredible upside for Darnell Mooney in a very inconsistent passing game in 2021. He's going to be the wide receiver 1 for Chicago, you would expect, in 2022, unless something changes. They bring in a free agent, but as it stands right now, he's the wide receiver 1 with Justin Fields, who Justin Fields trusts. That's a big thing going forward. Last year, he finished the year with 19 receptions on 29 targets and 195 yards over his last 2 games. That's the type of potential you're getting with Darnell Mooney. His fantasy value is up. He's going to be someone that's shooting up draft boards, obviously, as we go in more into the offseason, and somebody that you're going to want to make sure you have on your Dynasty rosters. Allen Robinson finished the year with just 38 catches for 410 yards and a touchdown. He burned a ton of people, including myself. Took him in the Scott Fish Bowl, and he was not anything near what people expected. He's going to be 29 and in his 9th season next season with his 3rd team in 2022, as he should not be back in Chicago as an unrestricted free agent. You got to wonder, at what point is he just kind of starting to wash up? Maybe he bounces back somewhat next year, But this isn't someone you should be investing serious draft capital on. I wouldn't be looking at him, even if he goes to a good team. This is somebody who I think he's past his prime. Obviously, his 9th year in the league. There's a lot of wear and tear on those tires, a lot of injuries that have mounted over the last few seasons. So this is somebody right now that I'm not particularly intrigued about. You could see as he finished 2021, he only had 2 games of double-digit PPR points and never exceeded 10.8 fantasy points in any game this year. His fantasy value's down. He's somebody that in dynasty leagues, you're not trading most likely because nobody's going to give you anything worth for him at this point. But he's somebody I'm not very optimistic about going forward. The last guy we'll talk about, Kmet. He was tight end 21, and that was despite not catching a single touchdown this season. And you know tight ends are extremely touchdown dependent. So even if he catches just a couple touchdowns, he could have shot up to a tight end 1. And that's the type of upside he has. Basically, the fact that you would expect, not just with the fact that he was tight end 21 without catching a touchdown, but the fact that he secured at least 5 targets in each of his final 7 games. The fact that he was utilized in the red zone at the most amount on the Bears at 19.4%, and overall just in target shares, he was number 2 on the team at 18.9%, just behind Darnell Mooney. So again, this is a guy that's being very trusted in the passing game. In year 3, you expect him to take another leap forward. Somebody right now who's not necessarily being buzzed like he was last offseason, this might be a really good time to buy Kmet, as I think he's going to be better. He's going to catch touchdowns, and he's going to be a potential tight end 1 candidate in 2022. Now, some goals for the Chicago Bears in 2022. They have no first-round pick. Their first pick is the 39th overall pick in the 2nd round. So they're going to have to figure out to get some impact players on this team without a first-round pick. They need to surround Justin Fields with more weapons. Wide receivers might be their biggest need for going into the draft and free agency. They need to have more weapons for Justin Fields to be able to have around the field for him to be able to get them the ball and just overall have more playmakers for him to make plays after the catch. They got to fix their interior offensive line. Their guards and their center aren't necessarily as strong as their tackles. And that's something that's going to be big, as if it crumbles, a quarterback's under center and the middle of the offensive line crumbles, that can be very nerve-wracking on a quarterback. So they got to fix that up. And now ultimately, new head coach Matt Eberflus and their new offensive coordinator Luke Getsy, are they going to make an impact? Now, for those that don't know Getsy, he did have 7 years in the NFL, all with the Packers before this, 3 seasons as the Packers quarterbacks coach, while also serving as the Packers passing game coordinator from 2020 to 2021. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers, back-to-back years, MVPs. You expect him to get MVP again this next year. And he's been an offensive quality control coach also with the Packers as well. And he was a receivers coach. So he's worked with Davante Adams. Davante Adams had a great season, both seasons under him in 2016 and 2017. This is a guy that knows offense working with Green Bay. So they're hoping that he could be the good offensive mind that needs to go with Matt Eberflus, who, again, was the defensive coordinator for the Colts. So they needed some help on the offensive side. So that's why Luke Getsy is the guy they expect to work with Justin Fields and develop him. So I think he could be a good candidate for them to be able to fix Justin Fields and be able to, help out just him make the leap over in year 2 to become a top 12 quarterback. That's it for the Chicago Bears. A lot of optimism as we look at this roster right now. They need to bring in some pieces, but you got your franchise quarterback. You got a good receiver in Darnell Mooney. You got a good tight end in Kmet. David Montgomery is a solid running back. They've got a pretty good defense for the most part. They brought in a new head coach and a new OC. So let's see what they do next season. The Bears are looking to try to make a leap into more relevancy next year, and I think they can do it. They just got to fix a couple pieces in the draft and free agency, and they're going to get there. If you guys enjoyed these videos, please make sure you smash that like button. Comment anything down below. Do you want me to wear more tank tops like this? Would you rather me put a sweatshirt on? I just came from the gym, so I'm just kind of wanted to make sure I hopped on while I still got the pre-workout flowing. And guys, thanks again for tuning in. We'll catch you guys in our next video breaking down our next team in our fantasy review series. Talk to you guys soon.